Hello and welcome to Light Map from SIFTER. My name is Gianni. On Light Map, we explore what it takes to make video games and interactive media from creative teams all around the world. It's a guide to interesting new gameplay experiences. And every episode, you get to meet new developers, artists, musicians, researchers, and more. And if you've ever come across Conan the Barbarian before, you might be familiar with the Arnold Schwarzenegger portrayal, or maybe the rippling artworks of Frank Frazetta depicting the Cimmerian. But what if Conan was just a little cartoony fella? And that's what you're getting with Conan Chop Chop, which is the first console release for prolific South Australian studio Mighty Kingdom. Kim Forrest is creative lead and Jeff Wong is producer. My guests on this episode of Light Map, welcome to you both.
Thanks, Gianni. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Great to meet you.
I can't wait to learn a little bit more about how this cartoony, arcadey style game came together. So let's jump right in.
Sure. What is it now? Probably approximately 3 years ago, a prototype was pitched to Funcom at, I think it was Gamescom, anyway, somewhere in Europe, to the CEO Rui of Funcom, and it wasn't anything to do with Conan, but he saw it and he was like, "This is pretty cool. This is a fun little experience." And most of what they'd done they'd done a lot of other things as well, but Conan was a big part of what they do. So he was like, "What if we did a sort of cartoony, chibi, cute Conan game with this? That's multiplayer. That's sort of a little bit of Castle Crashers, a little bit of those sort of Nintendo Switch multiplayer games, all that sort of stuff mixed together, and it just sort of came together from there." And we got the opportunity to sort of pull a prototype together fairly quickly to prove that the basic combat could work and the art style at a very early stage could work. So, I think, the mixture of a really fun, playable originally, and Rui sort of thinking, how can we make Conan more accessible to more people as an IP, led us to this. And then that allowed us to sort of pour our hearts and souls into a thing that we really, really, really love now. That's the origin story of Chop Chop.
It's interesting you talk about that because, I used to work in a comic shop back in the day. We used to sell a lot of Conan comics, and the type of people who would come in and buy them were old guys, basically, who were around in the 70s. So I'm curious to, how that sort of development of this look and the style of this game kind of came about, because it does feel very different. And I'm glad that you mentioned Castle Crashers, because it does feel like it's pulling along that legacy of Flash games that we would have loved from years past.
It's funny you should say that, because we sort of bring up, over the journey, the original artwork that we were working with in the prototype, and not long after that pops up. I'm like, wow, this has come a long way in terms of what we were going for. But essentially, what we were driving for was, like I said before, it was about sort of taking Conan to a new audience. I think Conan actually, as a character and as a universe, is sort of it started to make a comeback a couple of years ago. Exiles has always been huge with the fans that play Exiles, and there's those Conan games and there is that demographic that you spoke of as well. But I think the opportunity to make a game for everyone with the Conan brand was the vision that Rui had when he sort of had this moment of sort of serendipity. And then, at Mighty Kingdom, the people that were working on it early days, and the luxury that we have of having these artists that can take a few of your words and then turn it into what people get to see in Chop Chop is just, it makes our lives easy. Even though, all good things like Chop Chop are hard to make, but the art certainly came together pretty early in terms of the style. There was never many arguments about what it should look like. And even back in 2019, when we demoed it at E3, and it was still sort of, it wasn't a done game, and that was when we sort of got led down the path of you guys should add online multiplayer to this as well. But the response to the art and the style and the stick legs and the like spaghetti arms and stuff, people just leaned into it hard and loved it. I expect there'll be some Conan fans that are like, "What have you done to Conan?" But I think I hope that'll be heavily outweighed by just like what I've seen from my kids with sneak previews of it and stuff, where they're just like, "This is cool."
Now, Jeff, can you tell me, we've got a bit of an idea of how this sort of came about, and I'd still like to learn a little bit more about that, but can you tell us, when we're playing this game, what are we actually doing? Can you explain the gameplay for us for people who might be listening at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So the game experience is quite a mashup of a lot of different genres. In fact, I think the name Chop Chop is actually quite appropriate because it has one of our starting points is it's a roguelite game. So roguelite, not roguelike. So there is some meta progression in that, which is and really like important game loop that we were exploring. But on top of that, we wanted to add multiplayer and more of a party vibe. So, I mean, roguelites are notoriously difficult and challenging and usually pitched towards like a single player kind of grinding experience. So, it was a really interesting challenge for the team to explore how we can still retain that experience for single player, but also what does that look like when we add more players and expand it? And if we wanted it to be accessible, then like what kind of like balance changes, what kind of player dynamics we needed to incorporate. The game itself is like a hack and slash action combat exploration kind of game. I'm saying a lot of words because all of those kind of are key components in terms of ingredients to like throw in the pot, and then it kind of like just bubbled into the game that we have today. So yeah, you play as one of the very, very well-known Hyperborean characters, either Conan or three of his very, very good friends, and you basically are on a quest to defeat this evil wizard who has created a challenge because he's trying to resurrect an evil entity from like the past, and failing that first experience failing that first experiment, he's tried to like throw out the challenge to find a worthy vessel for that to happen. So of course, a barbarian can't give up a good challenge. So they've kind of gone on this quest. It's very magical. The world is different every time, and yeah, like trying to prove to this evil wizard that they can defeat all of these evil minions, get to the end, and whether or not you can actually defeat the evil wizard at the end is the challenge.
It is quite a challenging game, surprisingly so from the look of it, and it actually gave me a lot of Binding of Isaac, reminiscences as I was playing this. The sort of brutal nature when you go, okay, well, I'm dead. That was my mistake, but there is that sort of pull to get back into it. Can you describe how you sort of balanced the challenge, especially thinking that, as you said, some kids might be playing this game with enough to motivate them to keep playing and trying another run and seeing if they can get a little bit further?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a really important part of the game loop is the meta progression, because classically, like a very hardcore roguelike game is unforgiving and punishing, and it's satisfying in a way that it forces the player to gain mastery over time, which is really, really fun in a way because you keep losing, you keep failing, but you improve as a player. So we do have that component in our game, but we wanted to build like the meta progression as well, so that you do feel like you can improve your character as you go. So there is the element of personal player mastery, and then there's also the element of character progression. So we feel like that is a like an incentive for people to explore, oh, my character is growing and my gameplay patterns are changing because I've just learned a new skill, I've acquired some new equipment, and we feel like that kind of takes the sharp edge off that really painful grind.
Can we talk a little bit more about the visual style of the game? Because the beginning of it is very Saturday morning cartoony, sort of zany feel. What were you inspired by, and what sort of feeling were you looking to evoke, knowing that, Conan has a long history? What did you keep and what did you throw away?
Yeah, I think that's a cool insight from you. I think the sort of 80s 90s vibes of that cartoony nostalgia is definitely something that was leaned into. And I think Conan and the Conan movie, and there's so many different sort of versions of Conan out there that we sort of borrowed from. So I think we definitely leaned into that nostalgia hook. But also, like you've mentioned, Binding of Isaac, other games, past and present, that we leaned into, we sort of borrowed from all those things, which I think, that's how great games, and I hope people think Conan is at least good and hopefully great, because I think it's great. But I think those influences come into what you're doing, and you make choices about which direction on the journey of developing the game. You make choices about which direction you think works best for your game, for your audience. So yeah, we looked at games that we looked at hardcore roguelites. We looked at roguelites. We looked at more sort of action RPG games. And we looked at, I can't remember the Nintendo game, the cooking game on Nintendo on the Switch. Overcooked, like things like that, where there's moments of panic and frustration, and like you're yelling at your buddies to help you do something, and we just wanted to lean into all that. But getting back to the art, we really just wanted it to be a take on Conan that was just super different from what people had seen, and also, one of the objectives that became clear from Funcom and from us, and it was a really unified way of thinking, was, we do want those sort of, we want everyone to be able to play this game, but also we want the 45-year-old dads and their 11, 12-year-old kids playing this game together as well. So I think the art style, it has humor in it that adults can enjoy, and it has an appeal that kids can enjoy, and then everyone in between can enjoy it too. So yeah, I think that really is what influenced the decisions we made around it. But I think it's interesting you should say the things you throw away, because this interview isn't long enough to talk about that, really, because we went on a journey of you can see the town in the game. The first thing you see is the town, different ways of representing the town, different features that could appear in the town that we just, we tried, and we were like, no, that's not working. So, and like I said before, old images, people drop old images in the Chop Chop Slack every now and then, and it's like, oh wow, we really did take this thing on a journey. So yeah, so I think it's just part of development. I always say to people that are getting into games, it's like, if you don't like throwing your work away, you're probably in the wrong industry, because you're going to have to throw some of it away. So yeah, but I mean, the great thing about that is that we ended up with this beautiful thing that we have now.
Can you give us an example of one of the features that may have been in there relatively recently, that was cut in order to get to where we are now, just about to for everyone to play it?
It's a very probing question. I can think of so many, but I'm not sure I want to say. What's a good one? So one of the things we did have was, we did have the game as a way less linear experience, which was probably an influence from sort of the Zelda Link's Awakening type, or sorry, Zelda Breath of the Wild type, find your way, take things on earlier if you want to, if you're not ready for it. But what we found with that was just a real sense of frustration from players that were playing it, where we probably didn't put enough around helping them get there with that. So we actually found that just simplifying all that and making it a really quite linear experience of, like, you do this boss first, then this boss, then this boss. It actually brought, even though it's one of those less is more moments, where I think it brought way more clarity and direction to the roguelite experience, which I think was a great decision. I mean, because what we had before, like, if you picture, say, a Hades, if you had all those bosses out of order, it would just be a nightmare. So we've been able to really balance an experience that really works well, I think, and especially because every time you add a player, the balance shifts. A multiplayer, the balance shifts slightly. So to be slightly more difficult, obviously, and more chaotic. So that having that linearity allowed us to really fine tune that balance, which I think we've got to a really good place now. That's the only thing that we've thrown away that I'm going to give you, Gianni.
What about you, Jeff? Have you got something you want to add to the file?
I mean, I can think of a few examples of things that we've had to scrap as well. And I guess one that really comes to mind is we used to have a very different progression loop in the game, in that when you wiped as a team or as a player, there was like a button mashing point where you would like try to like fill up this bar and then gain something that tracks along with where you got to in the bar. But then we implemented that and we got that working in the game, and it was like fully arted up and everything. And then when we were really testing it, the UX experience very quickly discovered that because it's a roguelite loop, you die quite frequently. And then that mashing game is just kind of not fun. It didn't really add to the game. So I think this is a really good example of something that, like, in theory, the concept of it was good. And I think there are elements of that that are really satisfying. But we are really big believers, like as Kimber was saying, in throwing things out if they just don't work or they're not serving the best interests of the game. So as much as it was painful to have to like throw out all of this work that we did, I think we needed to do that. And this is, there are many examples of doing that. And I guess, like, who knew making games was hard, that you have to make these tough calls all the time.
Yeah, our UX director, it is hard. It's tough, but it's so fun. I love it. Our UX director, Nathan, he has a saying on feature development. He's like, when you're developing features, never fall in love, because you may have to break up.
You did touch on this a little bit earlier, and I'm just curious, in terms of accessibility in this game, what does accessibility mean to this team and to this project? What sort of things were you doing so that a broader range of people can play this game?
I guess, like, readability is something that was very important to us because we are releasing on several platforms, and the Switch just has a smaller interface. So making sure readability was there was one thing. We do have a few people on the team that are very conscious of like the flashing lights and stuff to make sure that that's not going to cause problems with photosensitive audiences. We had to consider a bunch of like different ways to make sure that we weren't going to incorporate something in the game that was going to be too offensive to people, especially like if we wanted to make this for everybody. So like excessive violence wasn't something that we were able to incorporate because that wouldn't have been appropriate for the players that we were wanting to get involved.
There's no blood in the game. Yeah, I think also just at even a higher level than that, I think there's a they're really good points, Jeff, as well. But there's also this idea that you can just you can sort of mash away in our game because it is a hack and slash game. You can mash away and you can do pretty well. You'll struggle in moments. So that sort of, even sort of little kids can play it and still have a really good time. But then there is also that depth of complexity around blocking and parrying and dodging and putting really good builds together to change the way you want to play. So you can play it at like a really light layer, and it's very accessible from that point of view, where even if you haven't had much experience with games, you can drop in and play it and have fun. But you can also dig into the like understanding of the metagame and the builds that you can put together with different charms and weapons and shields and things like that too.
It's always my favorite experience, finding some completely broken build and just sticking to that the whole way through. If I can find something that is completely broken, and then usually you come up against an enemy which ruins that whole thing and you have to all switch it out. Can you tell me a little bit about what the experience was like bringing it to a number of different platforms? It's going to be out on Xbox, PlayStation, on Switch and PC. Mighty Kingdom is a studio that's primarily known for its mobile games and games like that. So what was that like developing for all those different platforms?
Yeah, I mean, we probably both got good insights into this. I think, I mean, it's our debut title on consoles and PC for Mighty Kingdom, really. And the last console game that I had shipped was on the Wii, and 360 and PSP, I think, sort of that sort of location. So things had come a long way, and I think from then, obviously, like I don't think some of those games you didn't even have to worry about having a user account. You just put the game in and played it. So it was a real journey, and having these concurrent streams of requirements from the different platforms was quite challenging. So a lot of effort and time went into just being ready for the different platforms, and of course they all have different technical specs that can handle different things. So there was challenges there as well. I mean, it was a real journey. It's something that we've gotten quite good at, though. This journey has allowed us to develop internally as a company to be really prepared for the challenges that it throws up. And also the platforms, the platforms have been really supportive of us getting to where we needed to get to as well. It's like Jeff said, and I say this to the team every day. It's like good things are hard to make. Signing a user account, signing in, all that sort of stuff. It's like it throws up some challenges in development. The stuff that really isn't front of the player's mind, but it has to be right still, because if it's not, they notice. It was a journey. It was. But the fact that we can now say we're launching on all platforms, a game that we're super, super proud of as a team, is amazing. It's such a cool step for the company. It's great.
Jeff, can you bring us a producer's perspective to this? What is it like to bring it to a number of different platforms?
Yeah, sure. So bringing it to multiple platforms for like a same day release on everything is definitely been very challenging for us. As Kimber was saying, it's our first, as a studio, it's the first like console release that we're doing. So there were a lot of lessons that we had to pick up along the way. I think one of the really clear challenges that anyone that develops for console will face is just the very, very specific and different requirements that each platform has. So like one platform might really, really care about the button images and the controller images, and all of that has to be perfect. And even if you pull it from their actual source files, sometimes they flag it as no, this is not right, and then you have to update that to be in line, and it's like a constant back and forth in their certification process. Whereas another platform might ping you on something completely different, like network error messages or like controller disconnection messages. So it's quite a lot to have to grasp at the same time, especially for every platform. So yeah, it's definitely been an interesting experience, and every lesson you learn is something that you can carry forward and make something better in the future, like more efficiently as well. So we're really excited about that.
What's one aspect of this that you are both or individually really proud of? What's something that you just think about, man, I'm glad that we solved that problem? It can be big, it can be small. And what's one thing you think about whenever you think of, the hard work you put into this project?
I have one thing that springs to mind immediately when I start talking about this stuff. And for me, it's not specifically about this game. It's more just the team that made this game. I've worked with a lot of teams, and they've all been very good teams. And this team is no exception to that. Like the effort. Firstly, like we talked about us not having done this before. There was a lot of people on this game who definitely hadn't been on this journey, and several of them are quite early in their careers as well. But their ability to have just pure positivity and passion in the face of really tough challenges was incredible to me. The simple answer for me is the Chop Chop team that delivered on this, and lots of people worked on it over the journey, but and they were all really good people, and I consider them part of this team. But really, the core of this team, I could not be prouder of them, basically.
How about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to my mind was exactly what Kimbo was describing. But like in terms of things I'm proud of about the game, there are so many. The main one is probably quite like just broadly that I'm just really proud that we've actually managed to make something that's genuinely fun. Because, like a lot of the time when you are like in the nitty gritty, working the nuts and bolts of a project, it can be hard to know how it's performing, and you kind of always have that question in your head, is like, is this just fun in my head, is this fun for other people? Like, it's that question that you kind of throw yourself against the wall constantly asking. And then we do play tests quite regularly, and there were aspects of the game that we were feeling like, oh, this needs work, or the aspects that we changed and we were like, this is so much better. And such like a we did many cycles of iteration to tighten all of those little moments up. And to be honest, like, there was a stretch of time towards the end that I didn't really play test the game very much, because I didn't really have the time to do that. But then, like, I played the game after a significant break, and I was honestly like blown away, and also super proud of the whole team, because I was like, I'm actually really hooked on this meta and I'm having a really great time. And I felt like being able to feel that as like a developer on the team. I'm just super proud that we achieved that.
Yeah, it did. You just brought something to mind, because I can give you a more specific answer about the game as well. To me, I think actually the boss fights are a real point of pride for me, because I've worked on other games with boss fights and they are really hard to get good. And the boss fights in this game, we've got to a point where they're well balanced. They feel big and epic and threatening and dangerous. And you can have moments where you are a quarter heart from death, and then you kill the boss, and it's super satisfying. So the balance and the effects team and the combat and everything in the boss fights is certainly something I'm proud of.
We're talking just a little bit before the game's going to be in everyone's hands, but by the time that people listen to us, they probably could play it right now. How do you feel at this moment?
My two favorite feelings: terrified and excited.
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's like, we, we, we know, like, we know that we've made something good. But you just deep down, you never know how things are going to land, and there's always that sort of trepidation about it. But I mean, I'm super excited. Like I said, so much effort's gone into this thing, so much support from Funcom, just so many cool, fun times with the team and with Funcom as a partner. Like, we've built really strong relationships with them and within the team, and now we all get to see what the world thinks of it, and hopefully they think what we think. Jeff, how you feeling?
Yeah, like exactly the same. Like, definitely super excited, because it has been a long journey, and just, there's always that satisfaction of completing a project. And I definitely have that feeling now. But yeah, there's definitely like simmering in the back of my mind constantly, just that kind of terrified, like, just literally screaming constantly. Because yeah, I mean, it probably won't be screaming for that much longer, because it's going to be out and it will know for sure. But just that, like, uncertainty about, I don't know what to expect, is kind of there.
We've spoken to a lot of teams in the 6 or so years that we've been doing this, and I think this is one of the best episodes to describe what the process of game development is actually like. It's really bloody hard. It's terrifying and exciting at the same time, but no one would want to do anything different if they could have the option. Thank you so
Exactly
much.
right.
Yeah, thank you so much, both Jeff and Kim, for joining us. Conan Chop Chop, at the time you listen to it, is out right now. Yeah, you can play it. You can go to ConanChopChop.com. It's on Xbox, on PlayStation, on Switch, and on Steam as well. Tell us what you think as well. We're curious to see. I'm sure the team will be avidly pulling in your feedback as we go along. Thanks again to both of you for being part of this episode.
Thanks, Gianni. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks so much, Gianni.
SIFTER is produced by Fiona Bartholomaeus, Nicholas Kennedy, Daniel Ang, Sarah Ireland, Carl Pauletto, and Adam Christou. Mitchell Lowe is our senior producer. My name is Gianni Giovanni, and I'm the executive producer. You can find links to everything that we've talked about on our website. That's sifter.com.au, where you can read more about the games and the guests that we've featured. While you're online, we've got a new show that's just come out. It's called Walkthrough. It's a weekly news wrap show hosted by Carl Pauletto, who's a newsreader in his day job and now does the best of keeping you up to date with everything that's happening in games. If you can share that show and this show, Light Map, as well, we'd really appreciate it. Tell your friends if you enjoyed it and the experience that you've had. That really makes a big difference. While you're online, why not join the SIFTER community? We've got a Discord server as well at sifter.com.au/Discord. Every week, we do a sharing Sunday where people take their creative projects and tell us what they're working on, and we share it with the world so that you can see the cool creative things that people are putting together. That's all the time for this episode. Thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, have fun.